Good morning, everyone. Today I am here with a new chapter of Class 12th History, Peasants, Zamindars, and the State. So, first of all, we discuss about the sources to understand agrarian societies under Mughal period. Agrarian societies, that means agriculture societies. Our major source for the agrarian society history of the 16th and early 17th century are chronicles and documents from the Mughal court. One of the most important chroniques was the Aina-i-Akbari, authored by Akbar's court historian Abul Fazl. This text meticulously recorded the arrangements made by the state to ensure cultivation, to enable the collection of revenue by the agencies of the state, and to regulate the relationship between the state and rural magnate, the zamindars. The detailed revenue recorded from Gujarat, Maharashtra, and Rajasthan, dating from the 17th and 18th century. Further, the extensive records of the East India Company provide us with useful descriptions of agrarian relations in Eastern India. All these sources record instances of conflicts between peasants, zamindars, and the state. In the process, they give us an insight into peasants' perception of and their expectations of fairness from the state. Now, peasants and their land. The term which Indo Persian sources of the Mughal period most frequently used to denote a peasant was Rayat or Muzarian. In addition, we also encountered the term Kisan or Asami. Sources of the 17th century refer to two kinds of peasant, Khudkasht and Pahikasht. The Khudkasht were residents of the village in which they held their land. The Pahikasht were non resident cultivators who belonged to some other village but cultivated land elsewhere on a contract basis. Basically, they are talking about the agricultural laborers. People became Pahikasht either out of choice or out of compulsion. Uh, when terms of revenue in a distant village were more favorable, peasants moved to other village. Sometimes they were forced by economic distress after a famine. Average peasants of North India possessed a pair of bull and one plough, and other possessed two pair of bull and two ploughs. Most possessed even less. In Gujarat, peasants possesses about 6 acres of land were considered to be affluent. In Bengal, 5 acres were the upper limit of an average peasant farm. The three factors that accounted for the constant expansion of agriculture were the abundance of land, available labor, and the mobility of the peasants. While the primary purpose of the agriculture is to feed people, basic staples such as rice, wheat, or millets were the most frequently cultivated crops. Monsoons remain the backbone of Indian agriculture as they are even today. But there were crops which required additional water. Artificial systems of irrigation had to be devised for this. In northern India, the state undertook digging of new canals, and also repair old ones like the Shah Nahar in the Punjab during Shah Jahan's regime. Though agriculture was labor intensive, peasants did use technologies that often harnesses cattle energy. One example was the wooden plough, which was light and easily assembled with an iron tip or counter. A drill pulled by a pair of giant oxen was used to plant seeds, but broadcasting of seed was the most prevalent method. Hoeing and weeding were done simultaneously using a narrow iron blade with a small wooden handle. Agriculture was organized around two major season cycles, the Kharif and Rabi. This would mean that most regions produce a minimum of two crops a year, whereas some where rainfall or irrigation assured a continuous supply of water, even gave three crops. In the Mughal provinces of Agra, produced 39 varieties of crops and Delhi produced 43 over the two seasons. Bengal produces 50 varieties of rice along. However, the focus on the cultivation was basic staples such as rice, wheat, pulses and vegetable, etc. The Mughal state also encouraged peasants to cultivate cash crop such as cotton, oilseeds and sugarcane, which brought more revenue. During the 17th century, several new crops from different parts of the world reaches the Indian subcontinent. Maize, for example, was introduced in India via Africa and Spain, and by the 17th century it was being listed as one of the major crop of western India. Vegetables like tomatoes, potatoes and chilies were introduced from the New World at this time, as were fruits like the pineapple and the papaya. You can see the picture of the village in Mughal Empire. Now the village community. Despite the abundance of cultivated land, certain caste groups were assigned menial tasks and thus regulated to poverty. Such groups comprised a large section of the village population, had the least resources, and were constrained by the position in the caste hierarchy, much like the Dalit of modern India. In Muslim community, menials like the halal Quran, those who cut meats were housed outside the boundaries of the villages. Similarly, the Zadas, boatmen in Bihar, were comparable to slaves. There, there was a direct correlation between caste, poverty, and social status at the lower strata of a society. In Marwar, Rajputs are mentioned as peasants, sharing the same space with the Jats, who were accorded a lower status in the caste hierarchy. The Gauravs, who cultivated land in UP, sought Rajput status in the 17th century. Castes such as the Ahir, Gujjar, and Malis rose in the hierarchy because of the profitability of the cattle rearing and horticulture. In the eastern regions, intermediate pastoral and fishing castes like the Sadgopes and Kaivartas acquired the status of peasants. Power and functions of Panchayat and Headmen. The village Panchayat was an assembly of elders. In mixed caste villages, the Panchayat was usually a heterogeneous body. The Panchayat represented various castes and communities in the village, so it is called oligarchy. The Panchayat was headed by a headman known as Mukaddam or Mandal. Some sources suggest that the headman was chosen through the consent of the village elders and that this choice had to be ratified by Zamindar. Headmen held office as long as they enjoyed the confidence of the village elders. The chief functions of the headman was to supervise the preparation of the village accounts, assisted by the accountant or patwari of the panchayat. The panchayat derived its funds from contribution made by individual to a common financial pool. These funds were used for defraying the cost of entertaining revenue offices, expenses for the community welfare, activities such as tiding over natural calamities and digging a canal, which peasants usually would not afford to do on their own. One important function of the panchayat was to ensure that caste boundaries among the various communities inhabiting the village were upheld. In eastern India, all marriages were held in the presence of the mandal. Panchayats also had the authority to levy fines and inflict more serious forms of punishments like expulsions from the community. It meant that a person forced to leave the village became an outcast and lost his right to practice his profession. In Western India, people of lower caste presented petitions to the panchayat complaining about extortionate taxation on the demand for unpaid labor imposed by the superior caste or official of the state. In the eye of the petitioner, the right to the basic minimum for survival was sanctioned by custom. They regarded the village panchayat as the court of appeal that would ensure that the state carried out its moral obligations and guaranteed justice. The decision of the panchayat in conflict between lower caste peasants and the state official or the local zamindars could vary from case to case. In the case of excessive revenue demands, the panchayat often suggested compromise. In the case where reconciliations failed, peasants took recourse to more drastic form of resistance, such as deserting the village. Jati Panchayat. In addition to the village panchayat, such subcaste or jati in the village had its own Jati Panchayat. These panchayats wielded considerable power in rural society. In Rajasthan, Jati Panchayats arbitrated civil disputes between members of different castes. They mediated in contested claims on land, decided whether marriages were performed according to the norms laid down by a particular caste groups, and determined who had ritual precedence in village functions and so on. In most cases, except in matter of criminal justice, the state respects the decision of Jati Panchayat. Now, the life of village artisan. 25% of the total household in the village were artisans. The distinction between artisans and the peasants in village society was a fluid one, as many groups performed the task of both. Cultivators and their families would also participate in craft production such as dyeing, textile printing, baking, and firing of pottery, making and repairing agricultural implements. Village artisans, potters, blacksmiths, carpenters, even goldsmiths provided specialized services in return for which they were compensated by the villagers by giving them a share of the harvest or an allotment of land, perhaps cultivable waste, which was likely to be decided by the panchayat. Zamindars in Bengal who remunerated blacksmiths, carpenters, even goldsmiths for their work by as paying them a small daily allowance and tithe money. This later came to be described as the Jazmani system, though the term was not in vogue in the 16th and 17th century. That's all for today. Hope you like this presentation. Thank you.